Tom Henderson on this session, and you'll see also Duncan, Duncan will tell you his new title, but Duncan works with us here at Social Enterprise Scotland, and I'm not going to introduce him by title because I might get it wrong given it's just changed, but he'll talk to you a little bit about that. So, and we're also, I think, at some point bringing in Colin Love, who's going to join some of the conversation and just do a little bit of input once Tom's spoken. I'm just thinking, given I know Colin has to leave early, I'm actually wondering whether I might just ask Colin to do a bit of an introduction before you start, Tom, just in terms of some thoughts from a local authority perspective, and then Tom's going to take us a bit more in detail through the approach in North Ayrshire. So I'm just going to bring Colin in, if that's all right. Are you ready, Colin? You're about to go live on the video, assuming that's all right. There we go. He's had a minute to adjust his hair. We won't talk about hair. Welcome, Colin. There we go.
Yeah. Hi, folks. I am just trying to get my camera to come on. Doesn't seem to be working at the moment. But thanks very much, Naomi. First of all, great that Social Enterprise Scotland are doing this series of webinars. I think they've been, the ones I've sat in so far have been really, really useful. And I think it's a great opportunity for people from all areas around the country to contribute. And also good that we're being given an opportunity to talk about today how local authorities have been working with the sector during the recent and ongoing situation. For me, and this is my perspective, I suppose, rather than a South Ayrshire Council perspective on this. You know, we have passed through one or two phases and periods, I suppose, over the last 3 or 4 months. There was the initial period where people were in almost a state of shock, and there was a bit of panic, and there was a real fear about how it would affect individuals and how it would affect some of our social enterprise organisations. And we seem to have, we've moved through that, I think, to an extent. There was a whole load of information available and a whole load of support that was made available very quickly. And so there was an initial period of trying to make sure that organisations got the information that they needed, and organisations stepped up and tried to access the support, the financial support, by and large, that they needed to get through the period. And alongside that, there was also the practical kind of day-to-day support the local authorities were helping to provide. So working with social enterprise and the wider third sector to make sure that people who needed food and basic things like prescriptions and things like that were able to access that, and the councils were able to play a big role in that, but weren't able to do all of that. So it became a real necessity for us as a local authority to work with the third sector partners that were out there. And I suppose that's one of the things, you know, that collaborative approach and that partnership working has been one of the more positive things that have come out of this. I think there's been relationships built there that hopefully we will continue to build on for the future. And probably more than ever, we've seen the benefit of collaboration. We don't want to be duplicating what organisations are doing. We want to try and combine our resources and make sure that organisations and individuals are getting the support that they need. So that's something we'll try and certainly build on going forward. In South Ayrshire specifically, we have been trying to reinvigorate our social enterprise network of late, and we were moving towards relaunching that just before the COVID-19 crisis hit, and we put that on hold, but we're hoping to get that moving again. We're looking to recruit a development worker specifically to work on that, and I think one of the big things that will be to promote and develop the collaboration between organisations going forwards. That might happen slightly differently now, because previously we would have looked at bringing a whole load of people together in a room to try and do that, and now it will be different. We'll probably be making use of virtual meetings a whole lot more, but I think there's real positives in that as well. And more widely, I think we as local authorities need to look at how we can work together. better with our other local authority partners. And obviously we border North Ayrshire, where Tom Henderson works, and North Ayrshire have a really interesting approach at the moment around community wealth building, which I don't know if Tom's maybe going to touch on that today. So that's something that there is opportunities there for all three Ayrshire councils, and I think it's something that we can definitely build on going forward. It was always a sensible approach, I think, but particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 situation, I think it's something that we can all benefit from, and our communities can benefit from more widely. So that's really just a bit of background from me, I suppose, on the South Ayrshire situation, which, having spoken to other colleagues around the country, I think we've experienced probably similar situations in different parts of the country. We've done our best to try and get through the last 3 or 4 months, and I think the big uncertainty for a lot of us now is what will happen over the next 6 months or so. But we'll work together, and we'll try and support organisations as best as we can.
Thank you, Colin. That was a really interesting introduction, I think, and I'm gonna, if I may, because I know you're kind of pushing off, and before we go into the detail that Tom's going to bring us around the perspective from North Ayrshire, I wondered if I could just ask you a couple of quick questions. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the things that's come up quite a lot as we've been working is kind of how, to some degree, trust has really changed as a consequence of COVID. And you were talking about kind of collaboration and relationships that you've built, and I guess we're all used to an environment where, generally speaking, there's a lot of bureaucracy often around partnership. And I think just the nature of COVID has meant that there actually hasn't always been the time for the very bureaucratic approach. Yeah. And there's been much more a trust approach. Do you think, has that been your experience? And do you think that opportunity to kind of build trust in this short-term emergency response will kind of continue moving forwards?
Well, I would certainly hope so. That there's been relationships have been developed and built or strengthened, and with that comes a bit of comfort, I suppose, on both sides of a partnership, of a relationship, around what different organisations can do and deliver, and also the individuals involved. You build those personal relationships as well. So I would like to think that that will be a positive aspect moving forward, something that we can build on. And I think it's just been necessity, hasn't it? Previously, some of the things that have been done would have taken months and months, possibly years of discussion to try and get different funds and different support programs in place. But because of the situation, minds were focused, and I think we were just able to move through all those barriers and actually get things done. So yeah, let's try and not lose that. If that's something we can take into the future, then let's try and just get things done with a bit of pace and purpose.
Thank you. I think it's just interesting to take that time, and I guess we'll all end up doing a bit of reflection once the emergency crisis is over. And I think, as you rightly said, none of us quite know what's going to come in the next 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I think we'd be too complacent to think that we've dealt with the crisis. I think there's another situation, I think, that will arise as we start to see unemployment issues and all of those things within our communities as we move forwards. And I guess we need to continue responding and working together on that. So yeah. It's great. I can already see questions starting to come through, which is brilliant. I don't want to delay too much on Tom, and I was going to ask Tom if maybe you'd move into sharing some of your thoughts with us next from a North Ayrshire perspective, and touching, I guess, on the approach that you're taking around community wealth building.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Naomi, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me along to give you some of my nonsense. Basically, what I thought I'd do today, Duncan and the guys gave me a sort of brief around, established relationships and, the COVID-19 crisis and where do we go next. So I'm going to try and put some of that out, some of the stuff we're already doing within North Ayrshire, and where we hope to go in the future, if that's okay. And I didn't want to make any assumptions as to who knew what, but I thought I'd maybe start off by giving you a wee bit of the landscape that's been out there and what people like myself and Colin have been dealing with in the last 3 months or so. And I'm sure he'll nod his head and agree. It's been pretty relentless for some of the teams, you know, to get money out to people. And by and large, we've done a spectacular job, I think, even when I say it myself, of doing that. But it's taken some serious resource. I have to say that as well. So in terms of the COVID-19 crisis, the way we're structured in North Ayrshire, I'm maybe slightly unusual in as much as I sit in economic development. So the entire business team has been totally focused on getting resources to exactly where it was needed. And of course, wearing the social enterprise hat, you know, I've had that at the top of my priority. It also includes community organisations and charities and, you know, everybody in the third sector, really. So in terms of that, our starting position was with the government grants. And again, I may be really calling out the obvious here, but effectively what happens is, you know, the First Minister comes on at 12:30 on a Wednesday to tell us that we've got a £20 squillion fund to disperse amongst businesses, including social enterprises, etc. And it opens the following Monday. So we then go into panic mode and basically cobble together a procedure to make that happen by the Monday. And that's quite intense. So it involves various groups within the organisation. The first one was the rates-based grants. So our rates team were totally in amongst that. And of course, we want to get out to our businesses to make sure they get their share based on size of their rateable value, etc. So that has to happen very quickly. As a direct result, as you know, there's 32 organisations or local authorities, and I'm absolutely sure and convinced we do it 32 different ways. That's just the nature of it, because it has to be that slick and that quick. And you know, the critical thing is getting money out to people. So we've done that on every occasion in North Ayrshire. It's been really super response from all of the teams. To go forward, you know, that was followed by, you know, retail, hospitality and leisure stuff, B&B and hardship stuff. And whilst that was going on, the grants are changing as we go on. So some of you will remember that charities weren't involved in the first batch, you know, et cetera, Retail, hospitality weren't included. Then we started the fund for them. Then we found that people were falling between the cracks. There was a B&B fund and, you know, hardship, all with different changing criteria. And we tried to spread the net wider and wider to capture everyone around. So in saying that, with you know, my focus was on the third sector. Very early on, we started to think it was a good idea, and I worked, you know, across different divisions, and particularly with the communities division. We decided it was a great idea to try and record who was getting money from where. Also, that recorded who wasn't getting money from somewhere. So effectively, what we did was trying to list and record every organisation that was getting funding, starting with the Third Sector Resilience Fund, trickling through to the Wellbeing, you know, Resilience Recovery Fund, etc., etc. So we've recorded that. Where my head was at with that was that we would know that some of those were premises, etc., were going to get rates-based money, maybe retail, hospitality, leisure, and end to end, we could see the total benefit that was given to the organisations. Some of the third sector charities, social enterprises, had effectively a double done, if you like, which was great because they would maybe pick up a rates grant, but they would also pick up some third sector resilience money. You know, so that was good, and we could have a better overall picture of exactly who was getting help, and as I say, also more importantly, who wasn't getting help, and we could go after them. So with another couple of colleagues, Julia, who's going to be speaking today, Julia put herself up for trying to dedupe this list of who was getting what and when. And that's allowed us now to go out to organisations who haven't applied, who have not applied for everything, and only last week managed to get some of that information. I'd got an eligibility list from our rates guys, got it into our list, compared it with the communities list, deduped it, and then that has given us the ability to go out via the elected members to actually chase down people and say, do you realise there's £10,000 for you? Do you realise there's £20,000 for you? Etc., etc. And of course, we've created this tsunami wave that's coming at us this week. But that's just great because there was a lot of money still to be claimed. And as you're probably aware, that comes via the Scottish Government. So the local authority will claim it back. In terms of going forward, and what should social enterprises and local authorities be doing? I'm bound to say, get yourself a social enterprise strategy. There's 4 or 5 of them going about now. Dundee have got one, Glasgow have got one, we've got one obviously, and I think Edinburgh came after us. So I think there's about 5 or so out there. Because what that does is focuses your mind on where the development was. Within North Ayrshire, I had to start looking at baseline. We had a baseline based on the census, social enterprise census, 2017, and that told us we had 98 organisations. So when I came into post in 2017, they gave me a target of starting another 12 social enterprises, or finding, by hook or by crook, getting another 12 social enterprises to take us to 110, and we thought that was a reasonable number. They also backed that up. We have a local funding organisation called North Ayrshire Venture Trust, who gave me basically a pile of money to go and support those organisations. In the main, that money was used for business planning. Early days, we just didn't know what that was going to be used for, but in the main, the majority of that was used for business planning, because that's where we saw a real gap when we spoke to social enterprises. So going towards the end of the kind of 3-year strategy work, I've now got 240 odd plus. So we did about 12 or 13 times the target. Pretty spectacular. There were social enterprises, community groups. And one of the interesting things, particularly for me, was I've been involved in the sector since about 2003, was the number of aspiring social enterprises that it was very easy to turn into bona fide social enterprises. So typically they would have been community groups in the past who were really operating as a business and just needed some help and support to get there. So that's what the strategy involved, was trying to pull these guys in, and very early identified that, and the local authority were well up for giving me the support and backing to do that. That is, obviously if you go from 198 to 240 plus, there's an economic impact there, in terms of jobs, services, etc., etc. So it's been a much wider sweep than I think we could ever have thought possible. Once you've got a strategy, of course, you've got to have a dedicated resource, i.e. myself. We had a team early days to do that, and some funding to do that. So that's reaped some of the benefits. As the guys were saying earlier, going more forward, if you like, North Ayrshire have decided, and Colin alluded to this, we've been lucky in Ayrshire. There's what's called the Ayrshire Growth Fund, and we've used some of that money to position ourselves to be what's called a community wealth building council. Some of you may know about that. So I think we're going to be the first community wealth building organisation in Scotland, and all of that's based around sort of 5 pillars of sort of fair employment, procurement, and I'll talk about that in a wee minute. Plural ownership, community asset transfer, etc., etc. Engaging the anchor institutions, housing, National Health Service, police, etc., etc. to try and procure benefit and some sharing of resources, really. Shared value is probably a term I would use, maybe a more corporate term, but that sort of shared value. We've now got a community wealth building strategy, and we're about to go headlong into that. It was launched about 6 weeks ago. That's been launched now. And if you look at that strategy, one of the things that we've called out, because effectively I've been doing it as I've been going along here, and if you look at that strategy, somewhere around page 44, there's our success, and those of you that have been around the sector as long as I have will recognise this as good social enterprise practice, which is effectively taking one of your wee social enterprises, which I did. I took one from Aaron. I got together with the commercial directorate, a procurement directorate. I sat down with the organisation, helped them cost, price, tender, get that into procurement. Everybody was very, very positive about that. We had a third, an external partner, Food Scotland Network, helping us with this as well. And now we have in possession a wee social enterprise on the island of Arran that produces all the organic fruit and vegetables for the school dinners in Arran. It's pretty spectacular. To me, that's just good social enterprise practice, you know, but that's what we call community wealth building. So be able to join up the dots and be able to bring in the appropriate departments, etc., as and when we need them. That's kind of what this is all about. For a wee bit of background, prior to this is my first spell in local authority, and for a wee bit of background, in previous lives I had tried very, very hard to work with local authority. I worked for an organisation, disability organisation, that had 4 plants in 4 different local authority areas. And guys that know me have heard me tell this story before, but basically I couldn't work with any of the 4 local, I just couldn't get myself in a position to do any work with them, despite having the ability to work with global blue chip corporates. So, however, that totally changed, and I found it so much easier from the inside. I've built relationships with procurement, as I say, commercial, health and social care partnerships, and all of these relationships have helped the third sector to come, you know, more into the loop, rather than, I think one of the things that Naomi was referring to earlier was, you know, that trust aspect, you know. And I think sometimes the local authority can be seen as the enemy, and it's absolutely not the case. So we're always looking for projects and pilots, and I've got a few bubbling under at the moment that may become part of you know, what we would showcase as community wealth building. So I've got some out of school care organisations that I think may be viable for a cooperative, which is one of the big things in community wealth building. I'll also have some others that are similar to the Arran example, where there'll be some collaboration with some third sector. Our waste team have got a really good project that they want me to look at, along with some third sector, and again it will involve procurement, it will involve commercial, there'll be some green stuff, you know, so all of these kind of things. So the situation is really quite dynamic at the moment in terms of community wealth building, but you can see from having 3 years under our belt now of social enterprise strategy, we're starting to visualise and hopefully we'll realise some of the benefits of getting that, what I would call shared value, back into the local communities. Within North Ayrshire, that function sits again with economic development initially. So in order to achieve this, what we've done, and I thought it might be useful to help people understand some of this, is that there's 9 roles being created given this money we've got from community wealth building. So within the economic development team, there's 4 roles there. So we will have, we've got a locality-based, locality-based approach in North Ayrshire. So that will give us 3 new locality advisors. and each one of 6, that's a total, that'll be a total of 6, will each have, as part of its portfolio, social enterprise, third sector, charities, etc. So that means on a localised basis, they have somebody to go to. In the last 3 years, that's been me. I've covered the whole of North Ayrshire, but now we see fit to split that around each and every individual locality. There will also be, and I'll be able to hear the cheering from the social enterprise people, is a procurement responsibility here, because if you ask anybody in social enterprise world, and including myself in a previous life, you say, what's the big issue? And the big issue has always been procurement, you know. And I found that's not the case in North Ayrshire, because I've built the relationships with them. But we are now appointing a person who will look right across the business portfolio. So that would be the growth businesses, what we call our volume businesses, SMEs, etc., social enterprise, charities. And what they will do, will try and connect the organisations with the procurement teams. We'll look at the wave plan, what the local authority are buying, trying to connect them with our knowledge of those businesses. And that one of the things, I think in the brief Duncan and the guys gave me was, you know, what can social enterprises do? You really got to engage with that, because I took an approach in a social enterprise strategy where we were 7 or 8 months through, and already we had something like 133 of this complement. So we were way beyond the target very, very quickly. So I took a view, which procurement absolutely applauded, which was to go and visit everybody in our complement, went to see everybody. So me and a colleague that worked for me went to see every social enterprise, went to visit them. 2 reasons for that: so they could understand who we were, where the support was coming from, etc., where they could ask for support, but also to get procurement understanding and pass that on to see if how many of these organisations were actually fit for purpose. And if they weren't fit for purpose, I had the wherewithal through this funding to support them to get there. So we could give them business planning, we could use P4P to bring in, which I did on multiple occasions. It's a super service. And these guys would help the small social enterprise, not used to tendering, etc., to just get to the next stage. And we've done that very, very successfully. So a position purely within the economic development team who's going to look right across that spectrum of businesses and look for the connections, to me is one of the best things. There are some other positions in regeneration, employability, community benefits. So all in all, that'll give us a well-rounded ability to you know, and social enterprise is an integral part of that, but it's the whole business, the whole area, buying local, shared value, and in 2 or 3 years' time, maybe able to come back and tell you how that's going. I hope that's given you some kind of you know, view of the landscape there, and a kind of certainly wasn't short, but effectively I hope you know, it's given you some idea of what we're doing. Delighted to take any questions about you know, if there's any detail there, and hand you back to Naomi.
Great, thank you, Tom. There was lots I picked up in. Actually, you kind of, I've already heard one presentation on the community wealth building, but there's still so much to take from your presentation. I was really interested that when you went searching, you found many more social enterprises than census data had already picked up, and I think that was quite interesting to me in terms of, we always talk about there being 6,000 social enterprises in Scotland, and if we were to take your data, actually what we're seeing is you've kind of more than doubled that, which is just by going to look. And I think that, again, that question about the aspiring social enterprises and the building connections and relationships to kind of really turn that aspiring organisation into something that really can move on and do more delivery. So that was really interesting to me. I wanted to ask, and you brought up the question of procurement yourself, so you'll know, and I guess it's exactly why you brought it up, that sense of it always being cited as the big barrier. The thought that sits in my mind, and my background was in kind of waste and recycling, and I guess organisations that were involved in those kind of contracts many years ago. And my sense was it's that sometimes procurement isn't necessarily the barrier. The legislation's there. The biggest barrier is almost what sits behind that, which is a question of a perception of risk.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there was a sense of kind of, again, has COVID and those collaborative relationships that Colin talked about, has that reduced any of the fears around perception of risk that might feed into that procurement agenda a bit more?
I would say, I mean, it could well be some of the COVID, but I would say the engagement has reduced that risk, you know. So initially, as I say, I think there has always been a kind of level of mistrust, and you know, I don't think I personally, when I was on the outside, ever felt that mistrust. However, you know, when you can't get through a kind of suppression level, you know, you get totally frustrated as to why that would happen. I think it could come from a few different areas. The fit for purpose thing, I think, is quite key in this. So one of the examples I gave you was that one of the new pieces that I believe will become one of our next pieces of community wealth building is I'm working with the waste team, totally their initiative, you know. So they're saying, you know, we could do a piece of woodrow composting in a small scale. We'll bring green waste to a third sector partner, and we'll pay them to deal with this and create compost that they can bag and sell for profit, etc., etc. So there's a kind of circular economy type thing going on here. One of the things I think, and going back to the engagement thing again, is having somebody like me or a business advisor to come and say, okay, that's just great. You know, the waste team of the local authority want to come and give us this business. You know, it's fabulous. We've no idea how to cost this. We've no idea what resources we're going to need. Well, you know, so if you can then, you know, engage with the business and economic development team in our case, they'll show you how to do that. They'll support you in doing that. So my comment earlier about the business planning, that's exactly that, and having the funding, because we actually don't do it ourselves. You know, it's too much for us to do that as well. We use external consultants, so we buy the resource of an external consultant to go in and do that business planning for them. But of course, we're monitoring it all the way to make sure that the outcome is a good one for the business. So if you take the example I was telling you, that's a spectacular, you know, outcome if we get to there, and I'm absolutely sure we will. But end to end, you know, there has to be this starting position of, well, you know, business is a risk. Any business is a risk. You have to be up for that. That's where the fit for purpose thing comes, and then you have to have the credibility. And on occasion, maybe an accreditation, a quality, or an ISO, or something. But whatever that is, the economic development teams can help you to get to there.
Thank you, Tom. I missed a little bit of that because I think my internet connection dropped out, which is the first time that's happened in the whole of running these sessions. That's why it's always good for a few. It was the bits I was catching. Apologies, I missed sections of that. Was obviously the connection with the waste department, which I think I just said I got an interest in waste, so it's good to see that's there. And
I'll give you that one. Yeah.
It's also good to see we had Indy Johar doing one of our presentations last week, talking about how we almost need to move out of that very silo approach, and I think that might be quite an interesting thing to see coming out of the community wealth building as well, in terms of really being able to branch out and looking at taking an overarching perspective rather than a departmental one.
Well, the engagement thing again has been quite good, because I've just, I mean, basically rampaged throughout the local authority and connected with anybody that I thought was going to be useful at some point. And one of the big ones that I think we miss is the connection with health and social care. And so I've done some presentation to their strategic planning groups, and I've now got to a situation where procurement are coming to me to say, this wee organisation, we love them, they're just fabulous, but they need to re-tender for a new piece of work, and we don't want to lose them, so I can go in and support them. I've had the P4P guys again down to help me with that, and to make sure they're tendering properly. We'll try and help them, and it's literally just around all the business things, ticking all the boxes, making sure they get cash flow, etc., etc. Do they need a business plan? But that engagement, as I say, that's a back flush that I never seen coming from our procurement teams. So they'll come to me and say, "Can you help us with this fabulous wee third sector organisation that we don't want to lose? When did you think you were going to hear that?" I certainly didn't. So that has gone full circle, but only through the engagement. That's, to me, that's building the relationships, absolutely key in this.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? It is that thing about the connections and actually the approach that you've been able to take, the visits to everyone, the knowing who everyone is. Actually, you almost become their eyes and ears for opportunities as well then, which is
absolutely.
the thing that you can only do once you know people. So that's quite interesting. There were a couple of questions that just came in that I was just going to ask, and then I was just going to get Duncan to just reflect a bit from the Social Enterprise Scotland perspective around work we're trying to do more around kind of public affairs and looking at those connections a bit more. So there were a couple of specific questions just around, one was about the business support grant scheme that you've obviously touched on, that's closing on Friday, and I got a couple of questions. The first one for me is, did you find many social enterprises that were eligible but hadn't applied, and should we at Social Enterprise Scotland be doing something now to make sure they don't miss the Friday deadline?
Yeah, well, in North Ayrshire,
and then the other was, sorry, Tom.
No, so I was just going to say, you carry on, Naomi, and I'll
Yep. So yeah, just that sense of whether we should be making sure that social enterprises don't miss out, if you found that they were. And then the other was just, obviously the rules, I think, around that grant changed midway through in terms of looking at organisations that weren't owners of buildings but were tenants within buildings, and some of that kind of approach. Can you just, I think someone just said there was still seemed to be a barrier around when those organisations were still very small, so they're tenants but they're very small and only have one employee. Is that still one of the areas that isn't covered by the business support grant, and were there things that were pulled in to plug those gaps, or is it still a gap?
Okay, so there's two things there. The first one is that and that's what I alluded to earlier around taking a list of all the community grants and all the rate supports. So we then knew and built up a picture of exactly who had applied for what, and of course the remainder were who hadn't applied. So as I say, my colleague Julia Whittaker, I'd managed to get some of the source information for eligibility, and Julia had put herself up to deduping the list. And last week we went out to everybody who we recognise as a social enterprise and a community group and said, you need to apply for this by Friday 5 o'clock. So that's ongoing. The way we did that was we got some of the information to the elected members so they could get their constituents and say, look, you really need to do this. If you need help, come back to Tom, come back to the business team, whatever, and do that. So we've done that. We did it with hardship funds as well. The business team called everybody who'd started their business, and just to go back ever so slightly, in case everybody's not aware of that, some of the hardship fund was created for self-employed people who had slipped through the net, who had just started the business in the last 3 years, and that was all businesses, not just social enterprise. So we as a business team in North Ayrshire took the view that there were a whole raft and range of people who we had as new start businesses and they hadn't applied. So we called every one of them to say, you need to do this, and we got some more people to apply. Some of them had packed it in, decided not to do it anymore or whatever. But in the main, we got those people to apply. just as you said, the rates based grant, you know, and I alluded it to earlier, changed as we went on. So initially, charities weren't involved, you know, and then charities were involved in it. That was just great. Then it was opened up to sort of tenants, etc., etc. And in the main, that covered probably 85% of the people who were tenants of, you know, integral to a building. However, what I have found, a couple of examples in particular that I've been wrestling with, and it's down to the black and white rules of the thing. Cafes that are embedded in organisations, so cafes who are tenants of organisations, sometimes the criteria comes right down, all the way down, you whittle it all the way down to whether a sole proprietor or they're a limited company. In some of the grants, if you're a limited company, you didn't get any money. And this one in particular, you know, so I've got a cafe at the moment who is embedded in an organisation, is integral to the organisation, pays rate, you know, rents to them, etc., etc. However, they're a sole trader, and that's not in the criteria. And you know, one of the things we've done as we've gone along is try to position businesses as well. So where there's a kind of fork in the road for the criteria, we've tried to get for that. Some people, for example, weren't aware they had to be actually registered as getting a, you know, rates relief, small business bonus scheme. And all we did was go on the register, and then they were eligible. You know, so tried to take a proactive approach in all of this. But the tenant one is particularly prickly, but it's very complex depending on the range of criteria that's there. If people still have an issue, they really need to go directly to their rates department and talk it through with the guys, you know, wherever you can. And of course, they'll all be at home at the moment, so send them an email as quickly as you can and get them to respond.
Thank you, Tom. I think, I think the response that we've seen in terms of the support that's gone out during COVID, financial support to all sorts of businesses, has been like nothing we've ever seen before. And like you say, that the having to turn around a whole process in 3 days is quite a feat. I've got just a couple of last quick questions. Just one's particular, I don't know if it would fall under your remit, but I'll ask, and if it doesn't, just say no. And it was just a question of looking at self-directed support payments and how they're carrying on at the moment. So how are they being handled at the moment in terms of going out to providers?
With economic development, I'm afraid you need to be, depending on how your local authority is structured, we haven't been involved in self-directed support at all. You know, for us, you know, that would be sort of either communities or health and social care directors that would do that. And you know, without sounding coy, you know, we've had enough to do. Absolutely relentless, you know, and the number of grants. But I mean, absolutely critical. It's important. I haven't heard. I mean, I have the organisation that does that in North Ayrshire. They're one of my social enterprises, so I haven't heard any dialogue, and I'm absolutely certain that if they'd had an issue, because I've had P4P supporting them in their new tender, I've heard nothing from them. So you know, no news is good news.
Yep. That's why I caveated the question, knowing it might well have fallen out of your remit. But obviously we've got questions coming in, and I didn't want to
yeah, no, it's an important one.
Be seen to be ignoring it. It's an important issue. So I'm just going to ask one more, and then I'm just going to hand on to Duncan just to say just a few words. And I might get Duncan to just say a little bit about P4P, because it's come up a few times, in case people don't know who P4P are. Duncan, if that's all right. He's nodding. We're all good. So it's just a question about, and we'll do it as the last one. What opportunities are there to join up activity around the connections theme, so that taking the learning really from the crisis activity, and the question particularly, I guess, asked around kind of social prescribing approaches as well as procurement reform?
Yeah. And well, I would say, and of course I would, it's back to this engagement thing, you know. I deliberately took the view that I had to go out and literally dig the guys out and help them, you know. And some of that, I think, having never looked at a region before, back to the old mistrust. It's these bad procurement people, etc., etc. So there isn't. And as I say, I can only talk for what I found in North Ayrshire. Absolutely, honestly, not the case. Everybody I've engaged with has been helpful, supportive, etc. So I would say, engage with your local. Whether it's, we're all set up slightly differently. So not everybody sits in economic development like I do. Some are in communities divisions. Some, I think, are aligned under health and social. There's a whole raft of names. But whoever your business advisor is to engage with and get them to dig out the opportunities for you. That's really what they should be doing. We're just now setting out our stalls so that works on a localised basis as well. So as I was saying earlier, our community health building, we've got 6 locales, as we call them, and each one of those has a growth manager and a locality business advisor who will now take up, so large social enterprises with a growth manager, smaller ones with locality business advisor. So seek out who that person is in your local authority and say, well, how do I engage in this, and how do I get involved? It's now legislation that each procurement department has to publish their wave plan. So all of those opportunities are there. The other thing, and in early days I had to do this as well, was to get the sector to link on to PCS, the Public Procurement Portal. Get yourself registered, let them be aware who you are, what you can do. I felt I still had to go and feel them and touch them and say, are you ready for this? What do you need? Do you need accreditation? Do you need planning? So there's a whole spectrum of needs and requirements to be able to step up to the plate, and your local business team should be able to help you with that.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. I think, we're used to always hearing that there's a problem with procurement, and I always say to groups, it's your responsibility to find out about it. And actually, sometimes I think we hear that there's problems with procurement, but when you dig deep, groups on the ground don't actually really know the procurement legislation. So I think there's always a duty to kind of prepare yourself. And I always, again, the advice I would always give to groups is, even if you don't think you're going to be going for a contract now, look at the kind of things that is in there. Yeah.
I was just going to add one of the things, and it's maybe stating the bleeding obvious here, but one of the things we did very early days, because we had built such a good relationship, anytime I did an event, social enterprise event, and we actually had a couple of special events around procurement, because everybody thinks that's the big bad thing, was we got procurement to come and present the legislation and where you fit in that channel. We did exactly the same with community benefits. So we've done 2 or 3 road shows. We did it at my main conference, where procurement people were absolutely delighted to come along and tell us where the envelopes were, what the voting was. We actually, we do another thing within the business team as well. And one of the areas that procurement have difficulty with is what we call quick quotes. So that's quotes under £50,000 that smaller organisations can either go for or can collaborate, etc., based on their ability, etc. But we share, one of our team members takes all of the quick quotes and disperses it amongst the team. We then look through all our portfolios and say, him, and him, they can apply. Go to them and say, look, this is, for example, making this up, but it's landscape gardening. You're a landscape gardener. Is this too big, too small? Do you need people? What do you need? Do you need support? Can we come help you, etc., etc. So that's another, and that came out of some of the sessions that we did, that we could see that we weren't getting down to the lower, smaller businesses, which includes social enterprises. So we took that on as an initiative to see how it goes. Similar with community benefits, myself and another couple of colleagues get the community benefits that accrue, and we identify the people, because of our engagement, who we know are up for that. And what it does is it takes away this faceless tendering thing, putting something in an envelope, you don't get to talk to anybody, you don't see anybody, etc. So that again, I kind of emphasise the business engagement part of this, which we push at every level.
No, I think that's been really encouraging to hear, and I know we've got other local authorities on today that have taken similar approaches in terms of making connections and coming up with social enterprise strategies and really trying to engage. So it's good to see. I'm conscious that obviously we always say these run 11:30 to 12:30, and I know some people might end up darting off. So I just wanted to bring Duncan in just for a little bit of reflection and just a few comments, maybe let people know what P4P is if they're listening in and don't know, and if that's all right, Duncan.
Yeah, it's fine. So I'll pick up on the point of procurement just briefly. So I guess the conversations around procurement and social enterprise have been going for many years, and that resulted in the Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014. We talked a lot about community benefit clauses and embedding those in contracts, etc. So that was kind of a lot of kind of lobbying work going on around that at the time. And we also then had the Ready for Business social enterprise register, so social enterprises can register themselves as suppliers to local authorities and other public bodies. Now that's kind of morphed into P4P, which is it's effectively a specialist support service for social enterprises and enterprise and third sector organisations, in order for them to bid for public contracts and get them kind of contract ready, etc. So that's a kind of complete full specialist service for social enterprises. It's worth, if you're thinking of bidding for contracts, then contact P4P. I would say that'd be my top suggestion there. And they do run the kind of, I think, still the Ready for Business register as part of that as well. Yeah, so I think, yeah, procurement in general, I mean, yeah, the conversation's still ongoing. I mean, the comment was made in one of our webinars that we still have the same conversations now we had 20 years ago. I wasn't around the sector at that time, but a few people were, and they can see the same conversations happening. So I guess it's one of the roles for us to try and work out what those continuing barriers are. Is that legislation? Is that culture change? You know, is it local authorities not being ready to engage? Is that social enterprises not having the capacity to engage, that kind of thing? So it's just trying to work out those barriers. I suppose that feeds into just the work in Social Enterprise Scotland. So when the kind of lockdown policy kicked in, we very much, in a sense, took a blank sheet of paper and thought, what do we do as an organisation? Not our core remit particularly, but our operating plan, kind of what we were doing for our members specifically, and how we could better support our members, because we're a membership organisation primarily. So as part of that, we recognised there was a need for better local authority engagement specifically. So my role is changing a bit, which Naomi mentioned before. So my job title is Policy and Communications Manager, and now that's changing. So I'm very pleased to know that those two roles will be split. So we'll be having a Communications Manager recruited separately, and I'll be doing, I think my job title is going to be Policy and Public Affairs Manager. I'm about 99% sure of that at this current time. So that will be, yeah, concentrating on the things I'm already concentrating on in terms of policy, but also a more local dimension to that as well. So I'm very, very keen going forward to really build up individual relationships with individual local authorities, as well as engaging through the CLAG group, which some of you may or may not know about. The CLAG group is Social Enterprise Local Authority Group, and that was set up by Social Enterprise Scotland in partnership with local authorities a number of years ago. That brings together people like Tom, people like Colin, and others from different local authorities around Scotland to talk about social enterprise support and how we can better improve that effectively. A lot of people, I guess, are based in economic development, but some are involved in policy areas in the local authority, etc. So there's definitely, I would hope there's more of a role for that group as well going forward, and developing CLAG as a group, and how we can better engage with social enterprises, and how I can better engage with local authorities, through the group and individually.
Thanks, Duncan. I think we do need to do much more work. I think, you know, I've always said this was a session really, I think we talked about how local authorities are supporting social enterprise, but to me this is about how a social enterprise and local authorities truly working in partnership to deliver on shared aims, and we should be really looking at how we're helping each other, because I think it's by coming together to help each other that we get over barriers and we develop alliances, engagement, etc. So I kind of, as tough as COVID's been, I hope it's also given us a sense of a different way of working in some instances, and I guess Tom, you've already described how you were doing lots of engagement anyway, but I think it will be different for different people. So I guess moving forwards, it's building on those partnerships, building trust, and very much looking at how we support social enterprises to engage, and not always kind of go, how can you help us, but how can we help you, I think is as much the conversation that we want to have. So I don't think there are any more bits of questions coming in. Conscious you'll be off to go and probably deal with more of the business support grants, Tom. So I'd just like to say thank you for joining us today.
Very welcome.
Obviously, thank you to Colin as well. I know he had to leave early, and of course to Duncan.
Thanks, Tom.
So thank you very much. We look forward to engaging.